You're listening to the 10x Your Agency podcast, where every Wednesday for the next 12 weeks, you'll be learning strategies on how to scale up your agency and grow your client base from successful agency owners who've been there, done it, and built a highly successful agency. You'll learn how they attract clients, what their biggest causes of client churn were, and what their challenges were at different stages of building their agency. My name is Marcus Taylor, and I'll be your host. Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the 10x Your Agency podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, Jason Swenk, who is a marketing agency advisor who's helped hundreds of agency owners scale and grow their agencies. So today we're going to be talking quite heavily about selling an agency, how to build the systems, delegate, so that you can scale your agency to a point where it's ready to sell. So Jason, it's a huge pleasure having you here on the show. How's it going?
Thanks for having me, man.
So I was just wondering, before we jump in, I was wondering if you can maybe give us a little bit of a kind of brief overview of your journey building and selling an agency and what it is that you're doing now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, it's a long kind of funny journey. You know, I got started in the agency business kind of by accident, right? You know, one of my best friends looked like Justin Timberlake from NSYNC. That was a boy band a long time ago for all you younglings out there. And so I created a website kind of called In Shit, and it got really popular. And that was my first website I created. And just like most of us, we kind of fall into this by accident. Someone was like, hey, I'll pay you $500 to do my real estate website. And then I got another $500 to do a lawyer website. I was like, man, I can make money doing this. And because I used to work for Arthur Andersen, the paper shredding company, or the company that took down Enron. And I quickly said, you know, I'd said no to Arthur Andersen and started doing this. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I mean, I remember my first client asking me for an invoice, and I didn't know what an invoice was. And this was in '99, so obviously Google wasn't around. And so I just figured it out and created the right systems and grew it up to, you know, an 8-figure business once the day we sold it. And then, which was 12 years later, we worked with clients from, you know, Lotus Cars. Like, we did everything for Lotus Cars in the States. Did everything for, you know, like LegalZoom and Hitachi and all those different really cool brands, and had really cool people. And then after I sold it, I stayed on with that company for 9 months. My tour duty was for 2 years, or in the event that we sold the agency again, and I was lucky enough to sell it again. And then went to go work for some friends because I was bored just sitting around when all my friends were working. And then I had old competition reaching out to me saying, hey, how did you beat us? How did you do this? How did you sell your agency? And I just started helping marketing agency owners out and just really loved it. And I walked them kind of through a proven system that we used when we got smart, and it just allowed them to grow and scale. And I said, well, let's do a podcast. Let's do a video show. Let's create some value of stuff that we wish we had. So that takes us up to what we do today, right?
Awesome. So I'm curious to know the answer to that question. When the competition was reaching out to you and saying, how do you beat us? What would you say were kind of maybe two or three of the kind of key factors that made your agency a very kind of attractive agency to acquire?
Yeah, well, a couple things. First one, and anybody can do this, is have you ever watched the movie Swingers?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, it's a movie where like these guys get this girl's number, and they all debate about how long should they wait till he calls her, right? And they always like, well, we got to be cool. You got to wait 2 weeks. You got to wait 2 days, 3 days. Well, agencies are like that. When someone fills out your form, you don't want to call them back right away, right? You can be like, oh, we're busy, right? But I literally would call people back like within the minute, like while they're still on the site. And I would automatically go, hey, I'm sorry it took us so long to call you back, like just making a joke. So it was speed, right? And then getting them and walking them through a proposal, right? Before anybody else responded to them, right? That was one. The other one was I would simply try to figure out what they actually needed, and I would focus all the attention on them. I made them the hero in the story rather than making them the damsel in distress, right? Because every agency out there, almost all of them, they all focus all the attention on themselves. They make themselves the hero. And when you actually make yourself the hero, that doesn't allow the prospect that you're talking to be the hero. And no one wants to be kind of the trusty sidekick in the green tight pants, like the Robin of Batman, right? But they want a trusted advisor. So we would act as a trusted advisor. And those are just two quick things.
Got it. And I guess these are sort of cherries on top, right? Like there's still like a huge list of prerequisites in order to even be at the table considering selling or acquiring a business. So how long ago was it that the agency sold?
2012.
2012. So in this sort of kind of, I suppose, 5 years now, is there anything that you're seeing shifting or any kind of significant changes that if you were selling the agency in 2017, perhaps you'd have to do differently, or any changes in the landscape around that?
Well, I mean, not really since kind of when we sold it, but since we started it, yes. Because when we started a digital agency, we didn't even call ourselves a digital agency. And back in like the early 2000s, we could say we were a full service agency because there wasn't that much to do, right? In the digital, like there wasn't the Snapchats, there wasn't VR, there wasn't, all of these amazing different things out there, right? There was like kind of AdWords, SEO, website, and development, right? There was not that much. And so you could kind of get away with saying that. So I always laugh at people that say they're a full service agency because I know they're full of it, right? You can't be experts at everything out there. I mean, it's not possible unless you have an army behind you. And even then, it's really hard to do that, right? And so those are some of the things that are changing. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to having the right systems in place. And I think people are getting smarter now in order to figure out that they have to pick a niche or a niche wherever you guys are in the world, that you really have to find that specialization that can really kind of separate you from everybody else, where you can be the choice rather than a choice.
And do you think there's sort of different, in terms of kind of digging into what that niche should be, are you seeing anything around kind of agencies that niche on a particular service or agencies that niche on a particular industry? Are you sort of seeing any sort of strategy around choosing a niche having significant impact on the sellability of an agency?
There's so many different factors that go into why someone actually buys, and we can get into that. But, you have to figure out a particular niche that separates you from everybody else. So a lot of people are like, well, we're the best WordPress company. I'm like, no, you're not. There's just too many out there, right? And when you pick what I call kind of a horizontal niche, right, which is picking a service, you have to pick an emerging service, right? So like I started working with an agency that does amazing stuff around virtual reality. Well, there's not many agencies out there that do that. I mean, can you name any? No. So I was like, hey, you could pick that particular service and you can niche down at that. But if you're going to try to say, well, we're a Facebook agency, no, there's so many different Facebook agencies out there, or at AdWords. Good gosh, right? Everybody's an AdWords certified specialist, right? So that's the kind of the horizontal niche. But then you can pick a vertical, which is an industry like you alluded to. And that's usually the best to kind of start off with. But the thing is when you're starting out an agency, it's hard to figure out what industry you need to go after because you haven't really experimented with it. You haven't figured out which ones you don't like, right? Or which ones you really have passion behind or that you really know a lot about. And then there's the third, and this is probably the cream of the crop, right? If you can figure this out, is where the horizontal and the vertical meet. So you actually pick two. Like you pick an industry, but then you put a particular service with it. And then that's just gangbusters, right? So like an example of that would be higher education around Blackbaud, right? So Blackbaud is a particular software, and then higher education, right? So that's kind of the holy grail.
Got it. And obviously, the more you kind of niche down, there's a lot of benefits from a kind of a sales and marketing perspective, and just the clarity of what you're offering to what your potential clients are needing. There is also the other side of the coin, which is that you're reducing the pool of potential clients. What are your thoughts on sort of striking that balance between not choosing a niche that is too limited, but also having the benefits of having the niche?
Like if you go to my website, jasonswenk.com, right, you'll see agencies all over the place, right? You're only marketing to that niche, not saying you can't take on work outside of that. Like I work in the healthcare industry. I work in all kinds of different industries and help them out on a number of different faucets, right? But I've even seen people that ran $1 million business that only went after stuntmen of Power Rangers. Come on. Right? So that just proves that you can never nail down too much. Now, what most people say, like, especially when they start working with me or going through any of my programs, they go, well, Jason, I don't want to scare off anybody. I go, well, cool. Well, tell me how many leads you're getting now organically, not word of mouth. Well, not many. Well, then it's not going to hurt, right? You're actually hurting yourself more, not committing to an industry, because look, I wouldn't be on your podcast. People wouldn't be reaching out to buying my programs or working with me one-on-one unless if I didn't say I worked with marketing agency owners, right? If I said I'm just going after professional services, right? I'm a generalist. I don't understand, because everybody in the agency space are like, hey, I'm an agency. I'm totally different, which you are. It is a different space, right? And so anybody from the outside, it's hard to let in. And that's the same thing that people are thinking of you. If I had to pick an agency, and I went through this several times in my early career at the agency, right? So we would get lead opportunities from people in California on the west coast of the U.S., and we're on the east coast. We're in Atlanta. And so we'd get all these opportunities, but we'd always lose them. And our competitive advantage back then was our geographic region. So we would only win local business because people thought they could strangle us. But then when we actually started having a specialization and a niche, then we started winning business all over the world.
So you mentioned earlier about the importance of systems. When it comes to the point of selling a business, I guess one of the kind of key sort of things that needs to happen is the founder, the owner of the agency, needs to have systemized the business to a point where they can start to step out of the day-to-day operations of the business. And what would be your advice around for an agency owner who's currently very busy, having to kind of run day-to-day operations, to transition to that point where they can then be in a position where they would be able to transition out of that?
Well, I literally have a couple different roles I believe an agency owner needs to kind of portray, and everything outside of that should be delegated or said no to. And really at the end of the day, your first job as an agency owner is to lead and provide direction and communicate the vision to your team, right? Because if you don't provide direction to your team, then your team's going to make the best decision for them rather than the best decision for their agency. And if they don't know where they're going, they don't know where they can actually go, then they're just out of job, man. They're not going to, know what to do next. And so you want to do that, because I see so many agency owners, they're in such of the weeds like you're talking about, right? They're doing the project management, they're doing the account management, they're doing all of the sales, right? And that's fine in the very beginning, but it's just not scalable, and you're going to burn out, and you probably suck at a lot of the stuff, right? Like I sucked at project management, even though in the very beginning I did a lot of it. I was okay at the design, but when I started hiring people, they smoked me, right? And so you got to get out of your own way, and you got to kind of go through kind of a shift. I remember and I'll talk about the other roles in a second, but I remember when I actually did achieve the 4 or 5 roles that I'm going to walk you through. I remember I went through a depression because I was like, oh crap, the agency doesn't need me anymore. The agency didn't need me anymore for the stuff that I was actually used to do that I shouldn't have been doing. But now they needed me for the new direction. And then that's when I truly grew. That's when people started acquiring about buying us. That's when we started winning the bigger accounts, because it just wasn't me. If you're at a point where you're comfortable and you like where you're wanting to go and you don't want to grow, then fine, keep it dependent on you. But if you're unhappy or uncomfortable and you want to do something different, then you need to do. The second role is to coach and mentor your leadership team, and only your leadership team. And then your leadership team does that for their direct reports, and so on and so on. And you never want to kind of have over 4 or 5 direct reports. It's just too many, because my job was always to put them in a better spot, make them be able to achieve whatever they wanted to achieve. Because look, I mean, even when, after I sold my agency, I went to go work for some friends, I felt like I was at a cap. If your employees ever feel like they're at a cap, they're going to do something different because as humans, we want to grow and we want to constantly experience new things. And whenever we think we're not growing, then we're going to kind of ditch. So that's kind of the second thing. The third thing is understand the financials. You don't have to be really good at the financials. You can surround yourself with good people like a CFO or a bookkeeper, accountant, right? That just lets you know, like, well, how much profit am I actually making? Like, you'd be surprised at how many agencies I talk to that don't know their profit margins. I'm like, what? Or you can tell they kind of guess. I'm like, my God, that's the lifeblood. I don't care how many millions of dollars you are. If you're not profitable, you suck. You need to change. Like, don't brag to me, or they put the media spend in there. And I'm like, come on, that's just a cop-out. All right. That's a pass-through. The next thing is to really be the front person for the agency, right? To be the brand. Not saying put your name on the agency, but be out there, man. Set up those key relationships. Be that brand. Like, everybody probably knows, hopefully, Gary Vaynerchuk, right? And VaynerMedia. Like, he's the front man, right? And those are the key roles that you need to do, and really kind of to transition from an agency owner to an agency CEO. And then when you actually do that, then your agency is way more profitable and way more attractive to someone coming to buy it.
I suppose through your own experience and working with other agencies, what would you say are kind of the main things holding agency owners back from making that transition to focusing on those 4 areas?
Just the unknown, lack of knowledge. They don't have the right systems in place. They fear their team not doing it the way they do it. And they don't want to relinquish the control, right? They're control freaks. We're all control freaks.
And are there any kind of things that you'd recommend to get out of that rut and to sort of really start becoming more comfortable with that delegation process?
Take action and just try it out. You got to let your team kind of mess up. I mean, literally, like, you're going to see your team coming close to, the cliff. You got to let them kind of go over it first in order for them to kind of understand not to make it again.
So sort of becoming comfortable with the kind of collateral damage that comes from relinquishing some of that control.
Yeah, because the collateral damage later on is going to be that much bigger, right? If you're always doing it.
Before we go on, if you're looking to grow your client base and capture more leads for your agency, then I'd recommend checking out Leadformly. Leadformly is a lead generation tool run by yours truly that enables you to upgrade the forms on your website to conversion optimized forms that are going to increase your conversion rate and help you capture more qualified leads from your website. Using Leadformly, we've seen agencies capture up to 700% more leads. So if you're interested in giving it a try, we have a 14-day free trial that you can check out at leadformly.com. That's leadformly.com. Once again, that's at leadformly.com. One of the hardest parts in an agency, I think, to scale is often sales, particularly in an agency environment when you've got that kind of treadmill effect of client retention perhaps not being where it needs to be. And so you've constantly got to sort of fill up the top of the funnel to replace the clients that are being lost at the bottom. What are your thoughts on scaling and systemizing sales, and in particular, where to focus on in the funnel at different stages of the agency? So whether to focus top of funnel, lead conversion, client retention, like where would you focus at different parts of growing the agency?
Well, there's a lot there. So the first part is you got to build a predictable pipeline. Okay. And you're always building this pipeline. You can never just go, oh, I got this big client. Now I got to figure out on delivery. Then you're going to always constantly go up and down, right? You're going to be like, oh, I got this big client. Revenue's great. Now I'm going to, focus on delivery. Then I focus on delivery. And then 3 months later, your sales is shit again, right? And so you got to kind of focus on kind of 3 different channels. You got to have a inbound channel where you focus on putting out goodwill and providing people a way of like creating a really compelling, rich media blog or podcast or video show, right? Like, I'm so tired of agencies putting out the crappy ass blogs. Like, how to pick an agency, I'm like, come on. I was like, be creative. And, I can beat you guys up on this because I used to do this stupid shit. And so, you got to kind of And I know why you guys do this, because you guys have not picked a particular niche to go after because you don't understand them. But that's why it's so important to pick that out. Then you can create this really compelling inbound channel where you basically, the content you put out becomes a webtility, right? It becomes just like the name sounds, a utility. You need that, right? And so you need that. And you need to be able to capture information. Like too many of us, on the agency space, they just say, oh, I'm going to assume people are going to go to my contact page and fill that contact page out. I'm like, yeah, when they need it. But what about the 60% of people that are not ready yet? Oh, I don't know. They'll come back. They're not going to remember you unless you get their information and you constantly create this really good campaign, over time, and you keep them coming back to your utility. All right. So that's the first one, inbound. The next is have an outbound strategy. Yes, I said pick up the damn phone and call targeted people. I'm not just saying call, please don't hire a call center, right? That just does 1,000 different, calls. I'm talking about having a really compelling strategy. Like we would call people that were spending over a certain amount in AdWords, and we'd say, hey, we know you're spending over 20 grand in AdWords. There's certainly a lot of things that could be going wrong with people that spend over this. We'd like to do an audit. Boom, we'd get in there every time and sell them, right? So have an outbound strategy, and then have a strategic partnership strategy for, and I'm not talking about a referral partner back and forth. Who cares about that? I'm talking about if you're going after the higher education market, you should be partnering with Blackbaud, which is one of the biggest software tools out there for the higher education market, right? That's a strategic partnership. And then how can you align yourselves to do joint marketing, joint events, that kind of stuff? Because if one or two channels goes down, you still got the other one, right? Because too many of us are just relying on word of mouth, and word of mouth is not scalable. Does it make sense?
Yeah. And in terms of the order of those, particularly sort of generating leads versus focusing on retention, what would be your kind of advice around, let's say, client retention, average client stays for, let's say, 10 months or 11 months. What would be your thoughts on going into an agency and you've got a sales and marketing problem? Would you recommend ramping up inbound, outbound marketing, or focusing on client retention before you do that, or a kind of simultaneous approach where you tackle both at the same time? What would be your ideal way of solving that situation?
Well, if your retention's not there, you need to make a major change, because it's not worth bringing anybody else in, right? Because there's something wrong. So you need to fix that. It's easier to sell to an existing person that already paid you, right? So once someone pays you, they're 20 times more likely to pay you again if you actually deliver. But the problem is people just go, that's why I had to bring people on my team. I'm a hunter. I like the hunt. I'm not a farmer. I don't want to wait, and constantly, farm it and that kind of stuff. That's why I hired people that do the complete opposite of what I would do. You need to focus on the retention, but, at the end of the day, if you can't bring in the business, most of the time, especially when agencies are growing, the clients that they bring in now are basically from word of mouth. So a lot of those are actually the wrong ones, especially when you actually want to grow. And that's the kind of the thing that the agencies get into a lot, is they keep getting the same types of clients, right? And they hit a certain ceiling and they can't branch through that. So I tell people, look, make sure your retention's good for the next stage. But a lot of these clients you don't want anyway. They're not profitable. They're constantly always demanding stuff for you that is out of scope, and they don't want to follow your process because you didn't have a process then. Now you try to put a process on them. So you kind of want to get rid of them and go on to the new, right? And so that's why I kind of talked about those three different channels. Is right now you may have a lot of the wrong clients. And at the end of the day, I always have a motto that there's no such thing as a bad agency client. There's only a bad prospect or a bad process. And you got to figure which ones of those are happening. And hopefully it's just a bad prospect, right? And a lot of the clients you have now were probably bad prospects, but you let them in because you were struggling with cash flow.
So when you mentioned about the roles of the founder, the 4 areas that the agency owner, the founder, should focus on, I was almost expecting one of those to be related to hiring the team. At what point would you say it makes sense for the agency owner to step away from kind of recruitment and building up the team?
If I could do it over again, I would have hired an HR director when we were at 10 people rather than when we were around 25.
When you're still sort of 10, 15, 20 people, it's still at that point where every single person represents a large piece of the pie, so to speak, and can have quite a big impact on the agency. So stepping away at that point and delegating that to a HR person, what's the thinking around doing that a bit earlier, around the 10th person?
Well, the reason why people don't do it early on is they're not charging enough and their profit sucks. So they can't afford that person, right? And look, my time as an owner or as a CEO is worth more than everybody else's. I get paid the most. Right? So if I have to go search LinkedIn, I have to do all these interviews, it's the opportunity cost. Most people don't look at the opportunity cost of what it's actually taking you away from and all the other stuff you need to do. Right? If I could come up with a marketing campaign, if I could meet with the perfect strategic partner that could bring me $10 million worth of business, but no, I needed to interview this person. $10 million opportunity cost. People don't look at it that way. They look at, I don't want to hire someone non-billable. Well, okay. But then that makes you non-billable.
Jason, I want to go through a couple of quickfire questions, but last question I want to go through in the main chunk of this interview is what happens after the sale. So I think I was listening to an interview that you did where you mentioned that after selling the agency, you weren't quite sure what to do next for a little while until you spoke to a friend who asked to help her agency. I was just wondering if you had any advice, if you were to kind of go through that process again, what you might do perhaps differently to prepare for that post-sale situation of what to do next.
I wouldn't do anything different because, and I can't tell you guys what to do because everybody's different, right? The one thing I think a lot of people are very similar, especially in the agency space, right? We all think the grass is greener on the other side, but the grass is greener on the side that you water. Like, for example, every agency owner wants to create their own SaaS tool because they go, creating a product, we can make reoccurring revenue and we don't have to deliver anything. We just have to maintain technology and all that. So I developed an iPhone app. I did that. I hated it. I like dealing with people, right? But I looked at like my friends that created Pardot or, any of these big tools and they sold it for gazillions of dollars. Or, they didn't have to do all this, but they had all different types of challenges. Yeah, they didn't have the specific challenges you had, but all different sets. So don't think about, well, I'm going to sell my agency and I'm going to create a product. Sure, if you were meant to create a product, you would have done it already. So, that's one of the things that may save you some time or may keep you into running the agency. Look, if you create an agency that's extremely profitable, making you millions and millions, why would you sell it? I sold it because I wanted to do something different. And I wasn't really keen with a business partner that I had, right? I wish I should have bought him out, but, looking back at it, but then I wouldn't be doing this, which is the coolest thing I've ever done. But a lot of people also too look and go, well, I'll sell an agency. I'll do exactly what Jason did. Cool. Do it. If that's really what you really want to do, don't do it because it looks cool. Like there's still a lot of work that go into it. So, just find what you're really passionate about and go do it.
And what would you say are good reasons to sell an agency? You kind of touched on if you're not, so you mentioned business partner that you weren't keen on, but also wanting to do something else. Are there any other reasons that you think are good, valid reasons for selling an agency?
Yeah. If you say to yourself, if we could only do this if we had more cash, right? Or you want to expand into different things, right? That makes sense to merge with another agency. Just be careful. Like I always tell people with business partnerships, you either know the bad partner or you're the bad partner. That's kind of how I look at it. But that's a good reason. You want to do something else. One of the funny things is why people actually list or sell their agency or their business is their lease is up. Which is really strange, but if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like that's the longest commitment you actually have to make. Like usually you sign a 3-5 year lease, right? And it's for a big chunk and it's tied to you personally. So, that was always kind of strange to me. Or people are like getting ready to retire, right? But, at the end of the day, I tell everybody, there's only 1/4 of 1% that actually get to sell their agency for a profit. So it's very, very unlikely that you will sell it and make the money that you actually want for your agency. So what I tell people is look, you can create an agency that's extremely profitable that you can hire other people to run. You can create an agency that is incubator for creating other products and programs and follow your methodology. And that's most of the time what I tell people, because look, a $5 million agency will come to me and they're kind of in the no man's land, right? They're not big enough yet for the big boys to buy them, but they're too big for someone else to buy them. And they're kind of in the no man's land. And then they're like, well, they get offered like $1 million. And they're like, that's what? No. $1 million agency will think they're worth $10 million in cash. I'm like, think again. So
just want to go through the quickfire questions. First one is, what would be your number one book recommendation for agency owners to read?
Don't read books. So, but I would, I just listen to podcasts and videos, so I'll do a shameless plug. Listen to my podcast.
Brilliant. Are there any particular resources that are a logical starting point for an agency owner? Like any particular courses or things that you've put together that would be good?
Yeah, you're setting me up, dude. Thank you for setting me up. So I put together an agency playbook. So literally I took everything that made us successful and I put it into a kind of an 8-system framework that they can follow. So if you go to my website, jasonswenk.com/playbook, you can get there, or type in agency framework and it will get you there and you can go through it. But that's one. And then obviously the other resources I put out, I have a resource page. So just go to /resources and it will go through a couple of the resources that you need. So
perfect. And we'll pop a link into the show notes for those as well.
All right. What's the next shameless plug we need to put in there? Right?
You don't have a tool, do you? The next one is, what's your favorite tool for agencies?
So no, I don't have a tool. So good. I don't have to do a shameless plug. I love Infusionsoft, even though I call it Confusionsoft sometimes. But, I don't just use it for marketing automation. I use it for onboarding and a lot of the internal stuff too. So
what's one piece of advice that you would give to an agency owner who's currently in that kind of no man's land, let's say anywhere from kind of 1 to 5 million, to push through to 8 figures?
Set up the right systems. Systems outperform talent all day long. Like, you can have the most amazing talent, but if you don't have a system for them to follow, it's worthless, right? So make sure you have the right systems. Make sure you document everything. That's the only difference between an 8-figure agency owner and where you are now.
What's the biggest cause of client churn that you see in agencies that you've worked with? And what's an effective solution to solve it?
Lack of documentation, because, and communication, right? So, we just, we don't take the time in the very beginning to really kind of walk the clients through the plan and the process that you're going to take them through from the very, very beginning, not after they sign the contract, right? And this will help you with scope creep and all that good stuff. And then to document everything, because if you don't document everything, look, your clients are working with 1,000 other people and have 1,000 other things on their mind. They're not just working with you. So they're going to forget. So if you don't have the good documentation and communication, that's what's going to cause them to leave. And I guess results too. Get them results. That's the number one.
Always helps.
Always helps.
So final question is, what's next for you? What are you working on at the moment?
I'm just fine-tuning everything that we're doing. Like, we really just narrow focused everything. Like, I used to have so many different services and programs, but we really just put all our focus. Like, in the playbook, it's version 3. We totally redid everything on it. So this whole year in 2017 is just to make things just the best they can actually be, so we can be the number one resource in the world for agency owners.
Amazing. Jason, it's been a huge pleasure having you on the show and some really amazing insights. If people want to learn a bit more about what you're doing or connect with you, what's the best place for them to find out a bit more?
The best thing, guys and girls, to go to the website, jasonswenk.com, and Swenk is spelled Swenk. I'm not related to Hillary.
Brilliant. All right, Jason, huge pleasure having you on the show. We'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the 10x Your Agency podcast. If you're interested in acquiring more leads for your business, I'd like to invite you to a free webinar that I'll be hosting on how to acquire 300% more leads from your website without increasing your traffic. In this webinar, I'll be sharing how you can turn your website into a lead generation machine, 4 strategies on how you can boost your form submissions by 300%, and much more. So if you're interested, all you need to do is go to Google, type in Leadformly, acquire more leads. That's Leadformly, spelled Leadformly, acquire more leads. And the landing page to register for the webinar should appear at the top. As I said, it's completely free and we run this webinar every single week. So once again, thanks for listening to this week's episode and stay tuned for next week's episode of the 10x Your Agency podcast.